She walked along the quiet streets of her small town, her fingers still tingling from the piano she had played at the cafe that evening. It was a tiny place, with old wooden tables and chairs that creaked when people sat down, and the smell of coffee and fresh bread always filled the air. She loved playing there, not because it brought her fame or money, but because it allowed her to share her music with people who appreciated it, even if just for a moment. Every time she played, she felt alive. The world outside didn't exist and only the piano and her. Motions mattered. Most people in the town had never heard of her before. She didn't have a stage name or a manager, and she didn't chase the spotlight. Her life was simple. She lived in a small apartment above a bakery, where the baker was kind enough to let her practice early in the morning when no customers were around. She spent her days practicing, working part-time at the cafe, and helping her neighbors when she could. Money was tight, and she often worried about bills and groceries, but the piano had always been her sanctuary. It gave her joy and purpose, and that was worth more to her than any amount of money. That evening, she was packing up her sheet music. A man entered the cafe. He was tall, dressed in an expensive suit that gleamed under the dim lights, and he carried himself with a confidence that made people notice him the moment he walked in. He didn't speak at first. He just stood by the doorway watching her. She felt a little nervous under his gaze, but smiled. Politely as she closed the piano lid, he approached her table and introduced himself. His voice was calm but carried authority. He explained that he had heard about her through a friend who had visited the cafe earlier that week. He said he had been looking for someone with true talent, someone who could touch people's hearts with music, and that friend had recommended her without hesitation. She listened quietly, unsure of what to say. It was rare for someone like him to take notice of her. Someone who didn't know her personally or care about her small-town life. Then he made the offer that would change everything. He offered her money more than she had ever seen in her life, and the promise of opportunities she could only dream of. He wanted her to perform at a private event he was hosting, an event attended by important people who could open doors for her career. The amount he mentioned could pay her bills for years, allow her to rent a bigger apartment, buy a proper piano, and even take lessons with the best teachers if she wanted. It was overwhelming. She thanked him for the offer, but inside her mind was racing. She had never been in a situation like this before. Usually, people would compliment her and leave, or sometimes ask for a quick song and leave quietly. But this man was different. He didn't just want a performance. He wanted her to step into a world she had only imagined in fleeting dreams. She looked at him carefully, noticing the patience in his eyes, as if he understood her hesitation and was willing to wait for her answer. That made her heart beat faster. After he left, she sat alone at her table for a long time, thinking. She remembered the countless hours she had spent practicing, the nights she had stayed up, fingers sore and eyes tired, trying to perfect pieces she would later play for a handful of listeners. She thought about her life, the simplicity she loved, and the fear that accepting such an offer might change her forever. Was she ready to leave her comfort zone, her familiar streets, the small cafe where everyone knew her name? Could she bring herself to perform in front of strangers who might not understand her music in the way her regular listeners did? Over the next few days, she found it hard to focus on anything else. She practiced more than ever, letting her emotions flow into the music, trying to imagine what it would be like to play for such a distinguished audience. She walked the streets of the town, letting the sounds around her, the wind through the trees, children laughing. The distant hum of traffic shaped the music she wanted to play. Each sound reminded her why she loved the piano so much, why she had never sought fame or fortune, and why music had always been her truest companion. She also spoke to a few people she trusted, asking their opinions. Some told her to go for it, to take the chance and see where it could lead. They reminded her that opportunities like this rarely came more than once in a lifetime. Others warned her to be careful, saying that wealth and promises could be deceiving. They told her to make sure her heart remained true to her music, that she didn't let the glitter of riches overshadow the reason she had started playing in the first place. Late at night, she sat at her piano in her small apartment, playing softly. The city outside was quiet, and the only light came from a street lamp outside her window. She let her fingers move over the keys, creating melodies that reflected her inner conflict, hope and fear, excitement and doubt. She realized that the music she played now was different from the music she had played before. It carried a new intensity, a weight that came from the knowledge that her life could change with just one performance. Each note seemed to whisper possibilities. Each chord echoed the potential of a future she had never dared to imagine. As the day of her decision approached, she finally understood something important. The offer wasn't just about money, it was about trust. Someone had seen her talent and believed in it enough to offer her a life-changing opportunity. That realization made her both nervous and determined. She knew that accepting the offer meant stepping into a world she didn't fully understand, facing challenges and expectations far beyond what she had known. But it also meant that her music could reach people who had never heard her, that her talent could touch hearts in ways she had only dreamed of. She took a deep breath and made her choice. She would accept the offer. Not because of the money or the potential fame, but because it was a chance to share her music in a way that mattered. She wanted to see if her music could truly move people, to see if the emotions she poured into each note could cross the boundaries of wealth, status, and expectation. This was her opportunity to step out of the small cafe, out of the quiet streets she knew so well, and into a world where her music could shine in a way it never had before. The moment she sent her acceptance, she felt a mix of relief and anxiety. She knew that the coming days would be filled with preparation, that she would need to practice harder than ever and stay true to herself despite the pressures ahead. She also knew that nothing would be the same again. Her life, once simple and predictable, was now filled with anticipation and uncertainty. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a surge of excitement that outweighed her fear. She was ready to take the leap, to see where her music could lead her, and to discover what happened when her passion met opportunity. The days after she accepted the offer felt strange and unreal. She continued her usual routine, walking the same streets, passing the same familiar faces. But everything seemed different now. She kept thinking about the wealthy patron and the private event, imagining what it would be like to perform for people she had never met. Her hands itched to play, and every time she sat at the piano, she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness that was new to her. She spent hours practicing, focusing on pieces she had always loved and experimenting with new arrangements that expressed her feelings in a deeper way. Each melody she played carried her doubts, her hopes, and the sense that her life was on the brink of change. Sometimes she would pause, staring at her hands, wondering if she could truly meet the expectations of people who had seen only the surface of her talent. The idea of performing for strangers, some of whom might be very critical, made her heart race. Yet, at the same time, she felt a quiet determination. She realized that the music she played had always come from her heart, and that would never change. No matter who was listening, she talked to her friends and neighbors, hoping to hear their thoughts and gather courage. A few people encouraged her to embrace the opportunity fully. They reminded her that chances like this were rare and that she deserved recognition for the talent she had worked so hard to develop. Others were more cautious, warning her that not everyone had pure intentions and that she needed to protect herself. Their words echoed in her mind, mixing with her own fears and excitement. Creating a constant hum of tension as she prepared for the event, she visited the cafe more frequently, playing for the familiar faces who had always supported her. She wanted to stay grounded, to remind herself why she loved music in the first place. The comforting atmosphere of the cafe, with its warm lights and the scent of coffee and pastries, helped calm her nerves. Playing for people who knew her music intimately reminded her of the joy and freedom that music gave her. It was a reminder that no amount of money or fame could replace the simple pleasure of connecting with listeners through her art. At the same time, she began imagining the private event, picturing the grand hall, polished floors, the glittering chandeliers, and the audience dressed in fine clothes. She imagined the wealthy patron watching her, expecting perfection, and felt a wave of anxiety. The thought of making a mistake in front of such an audience was terrifying. She wondered if she could express the same raw emotion she did in the cafe while under the scrutiny of people whose approval carried weight and influence. The contrast between her small, familiar world and this new, high-stakes environment seemed enormous to cope with the pressure. She created a daily practice routine that became almost ritualistic. She would start each morning with scales and simple exercises to warm her fingers, then move on to more complex pieces that challenged her skill. She focused not only on the technical aspects of playing, but also on the emotional depth of each note. She imagined the stories behind the music, the feelings she wanted to convey, and the journey she wanted the audience to experience. Each day she felt a little more confident, a little more prepared, yet the underlying tension never fully disappeared. One afternoon, she took a walk through a nearby park, letting the sounds of nature influence her thoughts. Birds chirping, leaves rustling in the wind, children laughing as they ran past. All of it inspired her music in ways she hadn't anticipated. She began humming melodies, composing pieces in her head, imagining how she could bring those sounds to life on the piano. The park became a place of creativity and reflection, a space where she could balance the anxiety of the future. With the comfort of the present, her family noticed the change in her demeanor. She was quieter, more introspective, but also more focused and determined. They offered support in their own ways, small gestures like bringing her tea while she practiced, asking her to play her favorite songs, and listening attentively when she shared her thoughts about the upcoming performance. Their encouragement reminded her that no matter how far she ventured, she had a foundation of love and support to rely on. Despite her preparation, doubts continued to creep in. She questioned whether her music would resonate with people outside her familiar circles, whether her style would be appreciated by those accustomed to polished, showy performances. She worried that the simplicity and honesty that defined her playing might be misunderstood or undervalued. But every time these doubts arose, she returned to her piano, allowing the music to speak for itself. The act of playing grounded her, reminding her that her talent and passion were real, and that the music itself was her strongest voice. As the day of the event drew closer, she imagined herself walking onto the stage, feeling the weight of the audience's gaze, and sitting at the piano. She thought about how she would begin, which pieces would best express her emotions, and how to maintain authenticity in a setting so different from the cafe. Each scenario played out in her mind, sometimes with her succeeding brilliantly, sometimes with moments of panic. These mental rehearsals helped her understand both her fears and her strengths, preparing her to face the unknown with a mixture of courage and humility. She also considered the wealthy patron, wondering about his intentions and expectations. He had shown faith in her abilities, but she didn't know if he fully understood the depth of her music or her need to remain true to herself. She resolved that no matter the circumstances, she would not compromise the honesty of her performance. Money and opportunity were tempting, but her integrity and the emotional truth of her music mattered more. She wanted to ensure that when she played, she would be telling her own story, not a story crafted to please others. Night after night, she played in her small apartment, letting the piano absorb her thoughts, fears, and hopes. She discovered new nuances in familiar pieces and experimented with variations that expressed her personal journey. The music became a reflection of her inner life, a way to process the mixture of excitement and anxiety that came with stepping into a world she had never experienced. The notes carried both her dreams and her caution, creating a delicate balance between risk and security. Friends who had known her from the cafe visited occasionally, curious about her preparation. They offered words of encouragement, reminding her that her gift was unique and that the emotions she poured into her music were powerful. Their support strengthened her resolve, making her feel that she was not alone in facing the unknown. These visits, simple as they were, provided a sense of continuity and normalcy amid the whirlwind of anticipation. She began to notice small changes in herself. She walked with a steadier step, spoke with more confidence, and found that her focus on the piano deepened. The anticipation of the performance was no longer purely anxiety-inducing. It became a motivating force, pushing her to refine her skills and explore the emotional depth of her music. She realized that the journey itself, preparing, imagining, and confronting her fears, was shaping her into a stronger, more self-aware artist as the event approached. She made a list of the pieces she wanted to perform and the order in which she would play them. Each choice reflected her personality, her emotions, and the story she wanted to tell. She practiced transitions, experimented with dynamics, and considered how to maintain her emotional connection with the music even in a formal setting. The preparation was intense, but it also reinforced her belief that her talent could truly move people if given the chance. Finally, the night before the event, she sat at her piano in silence. The room was dimly lit, and the city outside was calm. She reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From playing in a small cafe to preparing for an audience that could change her life, she felt a mix of fear, excitement, and determination. The piano under her fingers felt familiar and reassuring. A constant companion in a world suddenly filled with uncertainty and opportunity. She knew that tomorrow would be a test, not only of her skill but also of her courage and authenticity. In that quiet moment, she understood something profound. The upcoming performance was more than just a chance to impress or gain recognition. It was a chance to prove to herself that her music mattered, that her passion and integrity could withstand the pressures of the outside world. It was a moment to step into her potential while remaining true to the essence of who she was. With that thought, she closed her eyes, feeling a sense of calm determination. No matter what happened, she was ready to give her music its voice and let it shine. Knowing that this opportunity was a turning point in her life, the day finally came when she would see the place where she would perform. The wealthy patron had invited her to a grand hall for a walkthrough before the event. She stepped into the building and felt a wave of awe. The ceilings were high with intricate moldings. The chandelier sparkled, throwing golden light across the polished floors. The walls were lined with art and mirrors, reflecting every movement. The scale of it all made her heart pound, and she realized just how far her music could reach if she allowed it to. She was guided to the piano, which looked larger and more imposing than any she had played before. Its polished black surface reflected the lights above, and she ran her hands over the keys, feeling their smooth texture. It was intimidating yet somehow inviting. She knew that, tonight, when people were sitting in those rows of seats, her music would have to fill the space, to reach across the room and into the hearts of people who had never heard her before. She felt both nervous and exhilarated. She spent hours trying the piano, exploring its sound, learning how it responded to her touch, adjusting her playing to make the music feel alive in that vast hall. Each note carried differently in the space, echoing slightly, adding a resonance she hadn't experienced in the small cafe or her apartment. She realized that she would have to use these echoes to her advantage, to let the music breathe and flow naturally, rather than rushing through it as she sometimes did in smaller rooms. The wealthy patron watched her silently for a while, then spoke, praising her technique and the emotion in her music. His compliments were genuine, yet she noticed a trace of expectation in his eyes. He was curious to see how she would perform when the audience arrived, and she understood that this was more than a rehearsal. This was the first step toward the big moment, and she felt the weight of it keenly after the walkthrough. She returned to her apartment and began preparing her special piece. She had chosen it carefully, wanting something that would tell her story, her struggles, and her dreams. She practiced slowly at first, focusing on every detail, every nuance, and then gradually built the tempo, letting the music swell with emotion. Her fingers danced over the keys, moving almost instinctively as she poured her heart into the notes. She imagined the audience listening, imagining their reactions, and allowed those thoughts to guide her performance. As she practiced, she reflected on her journey. She remembered the small cafe, the faces of people who had listened and smiled, the encouragement from friends and family, and the countless hours of practice that had brought her here. Each memory strengthened her resolve, reminding her that her music had always been a reflection of her life and her feelings. This performance was an opportunity to share that authenticity with a wider audience, and she was determined to remain true to herself. No matter what, the night before the event, she barely slept. Her mind raced with thoughts of the grand hall, the audience, and the wealthy patron. She worried about making mistakes, about forgetting a note, about failing to convey the depth of her emotions. Yet she also felt a growing excitement, a sense of possibility that had been absent from her life before. She realized that this was more than a performance. It was a challenge chance to test her limits and discover what her music could do when placed on a bigger stage on the day of the event. She dressed simply but elegantly, choosing clothes that allowed her to move freely at the piano. She arrived early, greeted by staff who guided her to the stage. The audience was beginning to arrive, filling the seats with murmurs of anticipation. She felt the energy in the room, the quiet expectation that made her heart race. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that she was ready, that she had prepared, and that her music was her strongest voice. When the performance was about to begin, she sat at the piano and placed her fingers on the keys. The room grew quiet, and she felt a moment of stillness before the first note. Then she played. The music flowed naturally, carrying the story she had crafted over years of practice and emotion. Each chord resonated through the hall, filling every corner, reaching every listener. She played with passion, with subtlety, and with confidence, letting the piano speak the words she could not. As she played, she noticed the reactions of the audience. Some leaned forward, eyes wide with surprise. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. She felt a connection with them, a shared understanding that transcended words and status. The wealthy patron watched intently, his expression unreadable, but she sensed a deep appreciation behind it. For the first time, she realized that her music had the power to move people, to touch hearts in a way she had only dreamed of. The performance continued, building to a crescendo that left the audience silent and captivated. Every note was deliberate, every pause meaningful, as she guided the listeners through a journey of emotion and story. She was no longer aware of the grandeur of the hall or the eyes upon her. She was fully immersed in the music, in the act of creating and sharing something deeply personal. In that moment, she understood that this was why she had played the piano all her life, not for recognition or wealth, but for the joy of expressing herself and connecting with others through her art. When the final note lingered in the air and faded into silence, there was a moment of complete stillness. Then, slowly, the audience began to clap, some rising to their feet in applause. She felt a rush of emotion, a mixture of relief, pride, and exhilaration. The wealthy patron approached her, smiling, and praised her performance. His words were kind, but more importantly, they were genuine. He had witnessed something extraordinary. Something that could not be bought or demanded. It was the raw, authentic talent that she had nurtured for years. As the audience continued to applaud, she felt a quiet satisfaction settle over her. She had faced her fears, embraced the opportunity, and shared her music in a way that was true to herself. The performance was not just a success in the eyes of the wealthy patron or the influential guests. It was a success in her own heart. She had proven that her passion, dedication, and authenticity could create an impact far beyond the small cafe where she had started. After the event, she walked through the hall one last time, listening to the echoes of her music lingering in the space. She knew that her life had changed, that opportunities would come knocking. But she also understood that the essence of her journey, the love of music, the joy of sharing it, and the courage to remain authentic would remain her guiding light. She felt a deep sense of gratitude, not only for the opportunity, but for the path that had led her to this moment. For every note, every practice session, and every listener who had supported her along the way that night. She returned to her small apartment, exhausted but fulfilled. She sat at her piano and played softly, not for an audience, not for recognition, but for herself. The music flowed easily, each note a reflection of her journey, each chord a testament to her growth and resilience. She realized that while the grand hall and the applause were unforgettable, the true reward was the realization that her music could touch hearts, that her talent was hers to share, and that she had the courage to embrace the unknown and shine in her own light. The day of the event had arrived. She woke early, her mind buzzing with anticipation and a touch of nervousness. The morning light filtered through her window, casting soft shadows across the room. She dressed carefully, choosing a simple outfit that reflected who she was, yet allowed her to move freely at the piano. Her heart pounded, but she reminded herself that she had prepared for this moment, that the music itself would guide her. She arrived at the grand hall, where staff greeted her warmly and guided her through the preparations. The room was already filling with guests, and the atmosphere was alive with murmurs and excitement. Some of the attendees were prominent figures, dressed elegantly, their presence commanding attention. She felt the weight of their gaze even before she began, but she also felt a quiet determination. She knew that her music would be her voice, speaking in a language everyone could understand, as she sat at the piano. Her fingers hovered over the keys, feeling the familiar texture beneath her touch. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment, centering herself. The first notes flowed effortlessly, carrying the story she had chosen to tell. The music was both gentle and powerful, a reflection of her emotions and experiences. She let the hall absorb each sound, allowing the natural resonance to enhance the performance, and for the first time, she felt the full potential of her music in such a space. The audience reacted in ways she had not fully anticipated. Some leaned forward, captivated by the subtlety and depth of her playing. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, their expressions softening with each passing note. She noticed the wealthy patron watching intently, his eyes focused, revealing a mixture of curiosity, admiration, and something deeper that she could not immediately name. It was as if he were witnessing not just a performance, but a revelation. She moved through her pieces with care, paying attention to every dynamic, every pause, every emphasis. The hall seemed to breathe with her, the acoustics amplifying not just the sound, but the emotion behind each note. She played with precision, but also with an organic flow, allowing moments of spontaneity to emerge naturally. Each chord became a conversation with the audience, a bridge connecting her inner world with theirs. As the performance continued, she felt herself entering a state of complete immersion. Time seemed to slow, and the boundaries between her and the audience blurred. She no longer played to impress. She played to share. Every note carried her story, her struggles, her triumphs, and her hopes. The music reflected her authenticity, and she felt a profound sense of connection with everyone in the room. It was as if her emotions were being translated directly into sound, bypassing words and reaching straight to the heart. The audience responded with subtle cues, the tilt of a head, the closing of eyes, the quiet intake of breath. She noticed the shift from polite attention to genuine engagement. Her music had captured their focus, drawing them into the narrative she was weaving with each phrase. The wealthy patron's expression softened, a faint smile forming as he realized the depth and sincerity of her talent. She had achieved something that could not be measured by wealth or status alone. She had moved people with the purity of her artistry. In the middle of her set, she introduced a variation she had composed specifically for the event. It was delicate, introspective, and at times daring. The piece required both technical skill and emotional openness, and she delivered it with careful attention to balance and phrasing. The hall was silent, save for the notes themselves, and she felt a wave of exhilaration as she realized the audience was fully immersed. Every glance, every gesture of appreciation reinforced her belief that she was exactly where she was meant to be as she approached the final piece. She allowed herself to fully embrace the moment. She played with intensity, passion, and subtle nuance, guiding the audience through a journey of anticipation, reflection, and resolution. Her fingers moved with confidence and grace, each note deliberate and meaningful. She felt a sense of liberation, a release of all the tension and doubt that had accompanied her preparation. This was the culmination of years of dedication, practice, and self-discovery, and she poured every ounce of herself into the performance. The final chord lingered in the air, and for a moment, there was complete silence. Then, gradually, applause erupted, soft at first, then growing into a thunderous, heartfelt response. People rose from their seats, clapping, cheering, and some even wiping tears from their eyes. She felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of relief, pride, and profound gratitude. The wealthy patron approached her, his expression one of admiration and respect. He spoke words of praise that felt sincere and genuine, acknowledging the power and authenticity of her music. After the performance, she was invited to meet some of the guests who had been captivated by her playing. They offered congratulations, shared how deeply the music had touched them, and asked about her inspirations and techniques. She spoke humbly, expressing gratitude and sharing insights into her approach. But she also realized that words could never fully capture the experience. The music itself had said what needed to be said. She left the hall that night with a sense of transformation. The world outside had not changed, but her perception of herself and her music had shifted profoundly. She understood that her talent had the ability to transcend circumstances, to connect people across differences, and to create moments of genuine emotion and understanding. The experience reinforced her commitment to remain authentic, to continue sharing her music in a way that reflected her true self, and to embrace opportunities without losing sight of her principles. That night, as she returned to her small apartment, she played the piano softly. Allowing the notes to echo the events of the day, each chord reminded her of the journey, of the courage it had taken to step into the unknown, and of the power of authenticity and dedication. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that this performance was only the beginning, that her music had opened doors not just to recognition, but to a deeper understanding of herself and her place in the world. The applause, the admiration, and the respect she had earned were gratifying. But the true reward was internal, the realization that she had faced her fears, trusted her abilities, and expressed her music with honesty and heart. She had proven to herself that she could rise to challenges, that her passion could guide her, and that her talent, nurtured with care and dedication, could create lasting impressions on those who were fortunate enough to listen. And in that quiet moment, sitting at her piano in the dim light of her apartment, she knew that she was ready for whatever came next, carrying with her the confidence, humility, and joy that only genuine artistry could bring. The morning after her performance, she woke with a quiet sense of fulfillment. The memories of the previous night were vivid, the sounds of the piano echoing in the grand hall, the faces of the captivated audience, the genuine admiration from the wealthy patron. She felt proud, but more importantly, she felt a deep sense of purpose. The applause and recognition were affirming, but they were not what mattered most. What mattered was the realization that her music had the power to move people, to connect hearts, and to tell a story that was uniquely hers. She spent the day reflecting on her journey. Her thoughts drifted back to the small cafe where it all began, to the countless hours spent practicing in her tiny apartment, to the encouragement from friends and family. She realized that every struggle, every sacrifice, had led to this moment, and she felt gratitude for each one. It was not just the performance that had changed her life, but the understanding that dedication, authenticity, and passion could create opportunities beyond imagination. Messages and invitations began arriving almost immediately. Prominent musicians, event organizers, and enthusiasts reached out, praising her performance and expressing interest in collaborating or attending future recitals. The attention was overwhelming at times, but she approached it thoughtfully, carefully considering each opportunity. She wanted to ensure that her path remained aligned with her values and the essence of her music. Fame and wealth were tempting, but she knew that the true reward lay in maintaining integrity and sharing her art. Sincerely, the wealthy patron invited her for a private meeting to discuss possibilities and support for her musical career. She entered the room with a mixture of excitement and caution. He greeted her warmly, his demeanor respectful and encouraging. He spoke of his admiration for her talent and offered resources, financial, educational, and professional, to help her grow. Yet he emphasized that the decision was hers, that he valued her autonomy and her artistic vision. His words reflected an understanding that her talent could not be controlled or molded, only nurtured and celebrated. She accepted his offer, not out of obligation, but as a means to further develop her skills and reach new audiences. She felt a sense of empowerment, knowing that she could embrace opportunities without compromising her principles. Over the following weeks, she began to explore new compositions, experiment with styles, and refine her technique with guidance and support. Each session was both challenging and invigorating, pushing her to discover aspects of her talent she had never fully explored. Despite the new attention and opportunities, she remained grounded. She continued to visit the small cafe, playing for the familiar faces who had supported her from the beginning. The patrons listened with smiles, some offering words of encouragement, others simply enjoying the music in quiet appreciation. These moments reminded her of the joy that had first drawn her to the piano. The intimate connection between performer and listener that could not be measured in applause or accolades. She understood that no matter how far she progressed, these simple experiences would always hold a special place in her heart. Her daily routine evolved as she balanced new engagements with practice and personal reflection. She often took walks in the park, allowing nature to inspire melodies and ideas. The wind through the trees, the laughter of children, the distant hum of the city, all of it became part of her musical expression. She composed pieces that reflected both the excitement of new opportunities and the quiet moments of contemplation that grounded her. Each composition carried layers of emotion, narrative, and personal growth. Allowing her music to resonate on multiple levels, friends and mentors played a crucial role during this time. They offered advice, encouragement, and honest feedback, helping her navigate the complexities of recognition and opportunity. They reminded her that while talent and success were important, her happiness and fulfillment were equally vital. Their guidance helped her maintain perspective, ensuring that she remained connected to her roots and true to herself despite the changing circumstances. As she prepared for subsequent performances, she focused on authenticity above all else. She selected pieces that spoke to her experiences, emotions, and values. She experimented with dynamics, tempo, and phrasing, exploring how subtle variations could transform the impact of a performance. She learned to read the audience without compromising her vision, understanding that connection came not from spectacle, but from sincerity and emotional honesty. Each performance became a dialogue, shared experience that transcended words and reached straight to the heart. She also discovered a newfound confidence in interacting with others. Interviews, collaborations, and networking no longer intimidated her. She spoke about her journey with humility and clarity, sharing insights about her practice, her inspirations, and her philosophy of music. People listened with genuine interest, drawn not only to her talent, but to her authenticity and the integrity with which she approached her art. She realized that influence and leadership could be exercised not through dominance or control, but through example and sincerity. Despite her growing recognition, she remained mindful of the pressures that came with visibility. She cultivated routines and habits that supported her well-being, including meditation, regular practice, and periods of solitude for reflection. She understood that her creativity thrived when she nurtured both body and mind, and she approached her career with a balance of ambition and care. This mindfulness allowed her to sustain her passion over time, ensuring that her music remained vibrant and true. Her journey also inspired others. Young musicians sought her guidance, eager to learn not just technique, but the values that had shaped her career. She shared her experiences generously, encouraging them to pursue their own paths with dedication and authenticity. She emphasized the importance of practice, emotional connection, and resilience, demonstrating that success was not merely about recognition, but about personal growth and meaningful contribution. Her influence extended beyond performance, fostering a community built on respect, encouragement, and love for music. Months passed, and her career continued to flourish. Invitations to perform in prestigious venues, collaborations with renowned artists, and opportunities to compose for various projects became part of her life. Yet she approached each opportunity selectively, ensuring that it aligned with her vision and allowed her to maintain the integrity of her art. She realized that true success was not measured solely by external validation, but by the ability to remain authentic, create meaningful work, and inspire others through one's passion. Through it all, the piano remained her constant companion. Each practice session, each composition, and each performance reinforced her connection to the music that had shaped her life. She discovered new depths within herself, new ways to express emotion and tell stories through sound. Her music evolved, reflecting both her personal growth and the broader experiences she encountered in the world. It became a living testament to the power of dedication, authenticity, and courage in quiet moments. She reflected on the journey that had brought her from the small cafe to the grand stage, She remembered the doubts, the sleepless nights, the careful preparation, and the moments of uncertainty that had tested her resolve. She understood that these challenges had not been obstacles, but stepping stones, shaping her into the artist she had become. Gratitude filled her heart for the experiences, the mentors, the friends, and the opportunities that had allowed her talent to shine. Ultimately, she found a balance between recognition and authenticity, ambition and humility, growth and reflection. She continued to play, compose, and share her music, guided by the principles that had always been at the core of her journey: passion, integrity, and connection. Her story became not just one of talent and opportunity, but of perseverance, authenticity, and the profound impact of pursuing one's true calling. Through her music, she touched lives, inspired hearts, and discovered that the greatest rewards come not from wealth or fame, but from the courage to embrace one's gifts and share them with the world.